Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I should hopefully cover all the time zones joining us today. In fact, as we make our way through, just a little bit of housekeeping to get started. If you feel so inclined, maybe you could throw your name and where you're joining us from today in the chat box. It's always fun to get a sense of our learning community where folks are joining us from. So if you don't mind, go ahead and pop your name and location in the chat box. I'm delighted to have you with us today to talk about categorizing open-ended survey data in MAXQDA. My name is Joel Drevlo. I am a certified trainer with MAXQDA. I'm also a MAXQDA cooperation partner. I've got a few years experience training new users to MAXQDA and also conducting qualitative research on my own. Just as a little snapshot about my sort of research background, I formerly worked for a large university-based outreach organization, and we conducted program evaluation for our educational deliveries. So actually one tool that we used quite a bit was surveys. And we were looking at things like what types of audiences we were reaching, how could we expand access. We were also looking at educational outcomes and things like that, trying to see how we could improve our programming to look towards building up improvement on those particular outcomes. I also have a lot of interest in teamwork in MAXQDA, team-based analysis. Most of the analysis I've conducted has been team-based. I was fortunate enough as well to contribute a chapter in one of MAXQDA's latest publications on team-based analysis. I encourage you to check that out. It's a free publication on the MAXQDA Press. You can find that on the MAXQDA website. And then of course, my current gig here doing qualitative data analysis software training with individuals, groups, organizations, all that good stuff. I am based out of the Boston area, so I'm coming to you from the East Coast of the United States. And if you'd like to get in touch with me about the session today, maybe consultation on something you're working on currently, any questions that you might have about MAXQDA or working with survey data, you can reach out here at joel.drevlo@iqdas.com. Also, if you would like to just check out the website, iqdas.com, you can look at some of the services that we offer and maybe book a consultation. So today I have around 30 minutes of material prepared for this session. So I'm going to be holding time at the close of our session to answer any questions that you might have about today's topic or just about MAXQDA in general. So go ahead, if any of those questions pop up throughout the session, go ahead and drop those in the questions box, and then I'll circle back and grab those at the end. I can also, if you'd like to raise your hand at the end, I can open up a mic if you'd prefer just to ask your question. So this session is being recorded and you will have access to it after the session. So if anything moves a little bit too fast or if you need to catch something again, you will be getting a recording and you can absolutely check that out after the webinar is through today. So let's jump into things. How to approach today's topic. I like to lay this out when I do webinars to kind of set a set your expectations for the session, to kind of help you think about the larger context of where this sort of tutorial is coming through so that you can maybe connect it to some other aspects of your work. So I'd like you to think about this in the larger context of your own survey data, whether or not you have data. So if you've collected it or if you haven't collected it. If you haven't collected it, you might even be in a better spot in terms of sort of some of the things that I'm going to try to introduce today. So the first piece here, what's your process to approach open-ended questions? This is going to be a consideration in terms of how you administer your survey. So for example, how many times will you be administering this survey? Will you be, is this sort of a one-off event? Will you be rolling it out to different audiences over different periods of time? Will there be follow-up questions? Will you be comparing these responses over time? Are you going into this with certain questions that you as an individual or an organization need to answer? All of these things are going to kind of play into how you structure your survey, and also sort of that piece you're going to want to keep in mind sort of some of these features that I'm going to introduce today, so that you can structure your survey to make full use of these tools that MAXQDA has built into it. I can't stress this enough, that planning out these details before you distribute your survey will be just incredibly helpful in terms of how you conduct your analysis. The next piece that I'd like to have you sort of think about today is, how can you leverage sort of this quantifiable data, or the countable data that you have that you collect with your survey. So things like demographic information, things on a Likert scale, those pieces that you can use to sort of sort and filter. And as you think about it, what can you count or measure? Think about how can you connect this to your qualitative data. So try not to silo these two pieces where you're looking at them from completely different perspectives. I mean, obviously we use different tools when you're looking at continuous numeric data than when you're looking at qualitative data, but there's some really interesting things that you can do if you try to work with these things together and sort of help them play off each other in your analysis. So this is something I kind of like you to think about. So hopefully, as I demonstrate the Categorizing Survey Data tool, and you take a look at the workspace and some of the things that you can include, and some of the ways that you can approach this analysis, it might actually help you to think about how you design your surveys in terms of sort of that end process. So in a way, you're thinking backwards, right? From the tools that you use to conduct your analysis, helping you inform the type of data that you want to collect. So anyway, that's my spiel. Hopefully that kind of puts you in a frame of reference to talk, to think about today's webinar. So our session agenda, or our goals for today, I'm going to first take you through setting up your workspace with the Categorize Survey Data tool. So I'm going to walk you through sort of how you need to get things set up and arranged, how you can customize it to your own particular style of analysis. And then I'm going to take you through a few ways that you might approach just getting started with your analysis. I think it's good to play around with all these tools to sort of see, hey, does this fit my style? Does this fit what I'm trying to do or not? It's good to have this sort of experience. You may, it may be something sort of in your toolkit that you don't use all the time, but it may come in handy at certain points. So we'll talk about getting started. We'll look at several different ways to do some auto coding with the sentiment analysis tool, the word search tool, how to make custom dictionaries, how to use the word cloud function. And then we'll look at another process using comments and how you can actually build up a coding system and document that coding system as you build it. So this is the goals for today. So hopefully that will give you a good sense of a way that you can get started, at least with conducting analysis on your survey data. So let's go ahead and get started with that process. So I'm going to show you a little bit about the particular data I'll be teaching from today. This is from the work-life balance example project in MAXQDA. You can find that on the open projects. You can find it on the example projects right here, English work-life balance. If you would like to follow along in MAXQDA, or if you would like to play around with this after the session today. So we're going to be using this folder here, which is survey data. And just to give you a sense of what our data looks like, let me open up this PDF. This is a really great thing to do when you pull survey data into MAXQDA, is to have a PDF printout or a Word doc, whatever it is, of your actual survey. And you can actually code this as a piece of metadata, or if you're passing this off to analysts that were not involved in the survey creation or the distribution, this is an absolutely vital piece of information for them to have. So great piece of data to include. So you can see what this is, MAXQDA example project, work-life balance. So we have a few pieces of data here. 16 questions in the survey, takes approximately 5 minutes. Surveys, obviously, this is not on the survey creation end of it, but sometimes shorter surveys can be really nice in terms of participation and interaction with your surveys. So we have some, to start off, we have some sort of demographic data, some sort of quantifiable data, countable data here. We have some things about age, we have relationship status, children. Notice we have this on 2 levels, so we can look at individuals with and without children, and then we can also look at numbers of children, highest level of education, employment status, and then we also have some, well, these aren't really Likert type scales, but on a scale of time spent on these things. And our open-ended question is going to be based off of the response to this question number 8. So what we'll be looking at today with categorizing survey data is going to be that open-ended piece, right? MAXQDA is really going to help you there in terms of analyzing that qualitative data, but don't discount those quantitative pieces in order to be able to sort and filter your data as you conduct your analysis or after you've conducted your analysis to see if there's any kind of comparison between those trends. So you can see here what the survey itself looks like. If we look at what it looks like individually in MAXQDA, I'm going to open up one of these documents. And a document in MAXQDA when you have survey data is a respondent. So this is one respondent, and then these are the 2 open-ended questions. Now you notice I only have 2 pieces of data here. All of the other questions are going to be in the background as variables. When you import that data, you can pull that in as a code as well if you wanted to see it. Keep in mind if you're working with really large projects, large volumes of survey data, it's going to make your project file pretty big. So keeping those as variables will trim down the size of your project file a little bit, and you'll still have that same functionality. But if you wanted to see certain criteria within this document, for example, an individual's level of education, you could include that here. But you'll see, looking at it in this traditional way, doing the analysis in your document browser is going to be kind of clunky, right? I'm going to have to click through each respondent to get to their responses, and I can only see what text they provided. I don't get to see all of those different variables and all the other features. So it is possible to do it, and I have conducted some analysis doing it this way, but it's clunky. So I would not recommend that. You'll also see, in terms of our organization in the code system, we have a top-level code for our survey open-ended questions. This is a really good piece of practice. You'll see why in a second. We still have our individual pieces. So when you pull in survey data, and let me just open up this image for you. When you pull in survey data, if this was an Excel table, this table at the top, or this row at the top, your header, is going to be auto-coded, right? So age will become a variable. This will be a valuable for group A, or for person 1 for this row, right? So it's going to be grabbing this top level row here, your header, as the auto code. So you will have a code generated. In order to use the Categorize Survey Data tool, you have to have a code on it because it's going to ask you to import, which you'll see in a second here. We have them grouped under one top level code. Now you'll notice there's a 0 here. There's nothing coded here, it's just an organizational code. So essentially it allows me to pull in everything that I'm interested in without having to click so many things and drag so much stuff in, right? So this is a really great piece of practice in order to organize your code system. So let me go ahead and show you where this tool is at. If you come up to the analysis option on your ribbon, and you'll find the Categorize Survey Data tool. And it's gonna ask you, drag and drop a code of a survey question from the code system window here. So now I could, if I had this structured and these were individual codes, I could only do one at a time. So for example, I'd have to do positive feedback, then negative feedback. But since I have them structured under one top level code, again, just an organizational code, there's no data attached to this, I can drag this in and it will give me both of my open-ended questions that were conducted in my survey. If you have a really large data set, you can select only activated documents. So if you have some groupings done already, maybe it's a pre-post survey or something like that, or you've distributed it to different groups, different classes, if you're doing a class evaluation, like different sections of a class or something like that, you can segment the data here. You can also filter once you get into the Categorize Survey Data tool. Do pay attention what documents you pull in though, because as we get into some of these auto coding features I'm going to demonstrate later, when you're searching terms, you don't want to be searching your entire project file, right? You're going to get false hits then. And you want to make sure that you're only auto coding the stuff that you want to auto code, right? Now it's not a big deal to go back and undo those things, but make life easier on yourself and grab the data that you want from the outset. So we'll go ahead and open this now, and what you're going to see is this will open up a brand new window. All right, and this is the Categorize Survey Data Window, and this will actually sort of freeze MAXQDA in the background. So you'll only have access to this tool while you're using the Categorize Survey Data tool. It's easy to get out of it. You just close the X in the left-hand corner on a Mac, right-hand corner on a Windows machine. And what you'll see is now I have my code system over here. So I have my two open-ended questions. I have one for why would you spend more time? And you'll notice, careful for this when you import survey data, MAXQDA will only take the first 63 characters. So your questions will get cut off. So make use of these code memos and pull in your survey data questions. This is really helpful. Even if you've created the survey, you probably won't remember the exact wording of the questions that you created. So it's really good to have this in your project. And especially if you have a team of analysts that you're expecting to do this work, this needs to be in here. So make sure you include this. All right, so we've got our open-ended questions here on the left. Some of this coding work is done in this project file. So we've coded for a few different things. And you'll see that those show up as subcodes of the top level code, right? So if I wanted to go between these, if I just click this, you'll see that it drops now from 48 segments to 9 segments, right? So I can easily switch between my codes and I get this nice view here, and I don't have to switch between all of those different documents. It's all in table format, much smoother to code. So I have my system set up here in terms of what I'm looking for in my, I've got my documents and my codes here. I have all my responses for my survey data that I want to code. So let me show you a few things that you can do to customize your workspace to make this work better for you. The first thing that you'll notice is you can resize windows. So I can grab and control this, all right? I can actually hide windows as well. There's actually a window here that is hidden. So if I select columns here, I can open this back up again, document. And you'll see I have this column here for document, and this is not terribly useful. In most cases for survey data, you'll just have an anonymized code, right, for a respondent. So it's not terribly useful information. You can actually hide this. If I right click, I can hide the column and it goes away. So if you're working on a laptop or a smaller monitor and you need some more real estate to actually view your data, that can be a really nice thing to hide some of those columns. You can, again, resize columns if you want to have more space on particular things and to see more stuff. You can also, again, we talked earlier about switching between documents. You can filter those things here from the tool if you didn't do that at the beginning. So again, you can do that once you're in this window. You'll also see there's an option to display or not display comments. I would, in my personal opinion, I would always leave this on. I think comments are a really great tool to use with MAXQDA to annotate why you code. It really helps you to slow down as you're working and to really sort of be more precise in terms of how you're applying code. So I would encourage you to use those. It can also be useful in terms of if you're taking notes, if you have something that you're unsure about or something you need to come back to or something you need to check in with a teammate, you can take those notes there. You can also create a code for that, right? Create a code for unsure, drop anything in there as you go. And then maybe that question will answer itself as you've done more coding. You've sort of figured out where to place that particular response. So you can turn those on and off if you'd like. You also see an option to display variables. So when we looked at our survey, we had those other questions about particular demographic information like civil status, highest level of education, number of children. You can turn these on and off, and you can choose which variables you would like to display. So which ones you want to actually have in here. So if you have a ton of variables and you only want to work with a few at a time, if you really want to plan out what pieces of analysis you're doing, you can set that up here. These columns also allow you to sort and filter. So if I, for example, number of children, if I just click on this, you can see that this will change. I have zeros now. This will change from ascending or descending order. So if I have numeric values, I can do that. Same with civil status, it will group things, right? Now we have some missing values in here, so this kind of is a little bit wonky, but you could go into your variable editor and change that. So that's one thing. You can also right click and you can set a filter. So I can look for particular criteria. it's probably more interesting in cases of numeric values. So I can filter, excuse me. Oh, I already had this set, I guess. I can edit my filter here. So I could say greater than, so I have some logic that I can include here. And then I could set a particular number if I wanted to see respondents that have, more than one child, for example. Now I can filter, and you'll see that my data set slims down a little bit. I go on from those 48 responses. So you can use this to do some sorting and filtering. So this is kind of a nice feature. You can do this, you can incorporate this in a number of ways to start out your analysis if you have a particular group that you're interested in and you want to start your analysis there. If you want to do a deep dive, so for example, I've done my first round of analysis, my first round of coding, and now I want to dive deep into individuals with 2 or more children, or individuals with a bachelor's degree or higher. So again, really tailor this to your specific approach and your needs as an analyst. So that's a few ways that you can customize your workspace. So I encourage you to play around with those options and make this setup look the way that you want it to. So let's talk about some of the ways that you can actually get started in your analysis. So let's look at some of these auto coding features that are available to you. We'll start first with the sentiments. So again, it's going to analyze whatever is viewed in your table. So you'll want to make sure that you have the proper code selected. So we want this top level code that has all of our responses to the open-ended response. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to go analyze sentiments. And a note on this, currently only available in English and German. I believe that they are working on Spanish functionality with this, but currently those are the only 2 languages available. You can include a stop list in this as well that will remove any like prepositions, articles, all those kinds of things. So if I click OK, actually a quick note here, if you want to learn more about the specific sort of way that this is calculated, there's a specific sort of dictionary and set of terms that they're using. Basically what they're doing is looking at a lexicon of positive and negative words, counting the instances of both of those, and then calculating a difference. And that will give you sort of your positive or negative sentiment. If you want to look into the specifics of that, you can click this little I box here. It will take you to the MAXQDA manual, and you can get information about the specific criteria that they use to calculate these statistics. So I'm going to click OK here. Now you see I have a new column. I actually have 4 new columns. Sentiment, which is going to be the calculation here. So I have positive words, negative words, and then I have the difference, right? And that's going to give me my sentiment. That's how it's calculating that. So again, if you want to see the specifics of that, you can in that help page. So you could, again, use this to filter if you wanted to. I could set some kind of filter. I could just sort these if I wanted to look at all my positive responses first. You can also auto code these. If I come up to Autocode Responses with Sentiment, if I click this, I can choose which criteria I want to code. So for demonstration purposes, let's just use all of them. And you'll see what will happen. All of my responses have now, 48 responses have now been coded with a sentiment. So you see I have a top level code for sentiment, and I have subcodes for all of the various breakdown basically of that. And if I click on one of these, you'll see I get my 1 positive response. If I click on this, the filter is still on here. If I click on this, I'll get my slightly positive responses and so on and so forth. One thing I will note here, I'm going to close out of this window. You'll see that everything I do in the categorized survey data is also reflected in my main project code system. So everything that I've done exists here as well. Right, so it's not going to just exist in the one spot. Okay, so if I open back up here, here's my main responses. So you've seen that I can auto code with sentiment. So that might be one place to start if you wanted to start your analysis with a certain type of a sentiment, like the positive or negative responses. You can also use search terms. So if I use the search and auto code feature, so again, I want to look at this table of 48 responses. I'll search and auto code. Let's say I want to search for the term family. I'm going to also use my lemma list. So if there's other versions of this word, it will appear, and only in my listed responses. So I don't want it to be searching these 22 responses for type of flexible work arrangements. If I hit my run search option, you'll see that now I get all of my responses that include this search term, family. So I have 6 responses that include that. And I can now auto code my search results. So if I Autocode Responses, it will give it a title. Let's change the color to green. And you see in my code memo, it has my metadata, right? The date, the search terms within documents. So I can document all of the specific criteria I used to find these words. I'm going to click OK. And I have these segments coded now. And you'll see this will appear down at the bottom. Let's drag this up. We'll drag this up just so that it's under, no, not under here. And we have it up in my up under my open-ended responses for why would you spend more time doing this particular activity. So there's one way to do this. One way that I think is kind of a little bit easier to do is the word cloud function. So I'm going to click into my top level. If I click on the word cloud, what this will do is this will just give me a word frequency. So you can see I have a minimum frequency of 1. I can adjust this if I wanted to. You can check out the documentation for that if you want to play around with these parameters. I'm going to apply a stop list as well. Okay, so that's going to remove some sort of false positives here. Now you can see size is going to be indicative of the number of instances where this is mentioned. What I can do though is I can right click. So if I wanted to see children, I can right click and I can auto code now with, I can auto code the word children. The one thing I like about the word cloud is that it gives you that nice range. So if you're just starting out, this is more of an exploratory piece, right? You can see these higher word frequencies. You can also, if you wanted to copy this word cloud, if this is relevant to your analysis, you could do that as well. So you can, again, just to right click and you can auto code these particular things. It gives you the same window, create a code. Let's make this one yellow. And here it's going to ask you a little bit more information. It's going to ask how much do you want to code? So typically in a survey, you're going to get briefer responses. So I would probably go with the paragraph. That's going to give you the context, the whole response from the respondee. You could do the sentence or the search term, but remember when you go to retrieve this code, it's only going to show what's coded. So a lot of times that single word code is not useful in terms of analysis. If you're using it just as a structural piece to get where you need to go, that's fine. But if you're trying to actually conduct analysis with it, it's not going to give you that context. So I would probably go with the paragraph, and then we'll go ahead and auto code. I have my 2 segments coded now, and you see those will be down here. Let's drag those up. And I've got my 2 auto-coded segments, so instances where grandchildren were mentioned. So again, that's one way to do some initial auto-coding. The other way to do this is to use a dictionary. Now, a small sort of problem with this, you do need to have the MAXQDA Plus or Pro editions in order to be able to get the dictionary functions. That's in the MAXDictio package. It's similar to the search and auto code feature, but it has quite a bit more capability. So if I open up my dictionary here, you'll see what this allows me to do is to create, basically to create and save search terms. So I have a category of relationships and I have all of my related search terms within that category. I can create as many new categories as I want to. I can also import dictionaries. So for example, if in your organization you have a list of search terms you're interested in, if you know of a dictionary out there that you're interested in, you can import those into your project file. And this is going to be really nice for those instances when you're issuing the survey multiple times, right? This is going to allow you to search and do that initial auto coding a lot simpler than having to open up your results, go into your search, type in all those terms, and make your settings. This way you can save these dictionaries and you can go through and do this coding. There's also a lot more capability in terms of how you can adjust this. So for example, you see whole word, case sensitive, starting letters. So for example, family, this will also give me families if I'm looking at that in terms of the ending of the word. So there's a little bit more customization that's possible here. If you click this I box, you can find all the capabilities listed in the documentation, sort of how you can customize this. You can also then auto code with that. So it's similar to what we saw with the search and auto code. Once you've found those hits, you'll be able to auto code those in your predefined dictionary. So that can be kind of a helpful piece. Okay, so that takes us through most of the auto coding features that you can use. One last thing I want to demonstrate is sort of how you would go about using the comments piece. If you can imagine, if I were to hide those codes, if I did not have a code system yet, if I was starting from scratch, one way that you can do this is you can read through your responses and you can offer up a brief summary here. In your code comments, you can find some particular keywords that might be interesting. You can also include notes here, analyst notes, researcher notes, if you want to include those here. This is also really nice. I've used this in the past for sort of internal surveys when we want to, of course, we ask for permission if we can include people's responses. But again, as another layer of anonymity, you essentially paraphrase or rephrase what individuals have said. So then you can include that with being sure that you're maintaining anonymity of your respondents. So that can be a nice piece as well, an initial piece to go through and sort of summarize or paraphrase what people are saying. And then from your comments, you can actually build out a coding system. And what's nice there is really just adding in that documentation piece. So this is especially helpful if you are starting this analysis as maybe a project lead or a project manager, and you're passing it off to a team of analysts within your organization. You can really document how these codes are created with these comments. And then you can build that into your code memos so that as your team of analysts go to do the work, they have a sound basis for when and when not to apply certain codes. So this comment feature is really a helpful tool in MAXQDA. Another thing that should be noted is you can't export these results, right? So if I export this as an Excel table or as a Word document, I can export along my comments. So any analytical notes that I have attached to this segment of text will remain, right? They'll be attached there. So that's a really helpful piece to make sure that any notes that I've taken in my project or anything that I've done to build up this analysis as I've gone maintains its connection to the actual data in my project file. So that's a really useful feature. And essentially, to create a new code. So if I was building this from my comments, and let's say I've taken notes on all 48 of these responses, and I'm starting to see a trend emerge of a certain type of response. If I wanted to create a new code, essentially, I can click into this box to code the whole cell. I can right click and I can create and assign a new code here. You can see I also have a key command if you like to use key commands rather. Or you can actually double click into here and you can highlight certain pieces of text. If you see a certain keyword or a certain chunk of text within that segment that you want it to code, and I can right click, create it, and assign a new code here. So if I just show you what that looks like, I'll just create one demo code. I will make this one red, and I'll click OK. And you can see that that pops up here in my code system. And again, it will be reflected in my main project file code system as well. So I have the one coded segment attached to this. So that can be kind of a helpful way to do things. The coding is going to be just like in your regular project file where you're going to be dragging and dropping. So I have this demo code created. Let's say this fits as well. I can simply drag and drop that here. Or I can, it's not really going to work from the other direction because it's going to want to sort and filter. So you'll really only be able to go the one direction. In your main project file, you'll be able to go both directions from your code system and from the document browser. But in this tool, because as soon as I click here, it's going to filter, I can really only go this direction. And if I wanted to, again, to highlight a certain portion of text, I double click in here, grab this, and I can drop on that piece of text. You'll notice that my code also populates here in this column. So I have my demo code populates here as well. So in terms of working with survey data, because you're working, it's not like an interview transcript where you have one long document. You're working with many, many small pieces of information. The Categorize Survey Data tool is a really helpful way to be able to view all of your data at once, see how these codes are getting applied, see your comments, see your variables, and to be able to sort of drag and drop these codes in a much simpler fashion than having to click through 1,000 documents if you're working with a really large piece of survey data. Okay, so we are, I think, at about 30 minutes of material, and I feel pretty good. I think we can stop at this point.